have you ever watched a room go quiet the second you say, okay, moving on to the next topic? That silence isn't focus. That silence is people starting to think, wait, why are we switching topics? Where are we coming from? Should I start checking my email? That is the trap that we can fall into. And the thing for us as trainers is we oftentimes don't plan our bridges, right? Our transitions from one topic to the next. But that can be a huge trap where we could potentially lose our audience. So think about the last great movie that you watched. You didn't spend 2 hours wondering why scene 4 came after scene 3. It just flowed, right? And now think about the last training that you sat through. Did it flow like that? Or did it feel like someone kept hitting stop and play? We want to be like a movie, like an action-packed movie. The more that we can keep people engaged and have those solid transitions, the more they will have an effective experience. So that's what our topic is about today. Welcome everyone to Let's Skill Up Trainer Table. I'm Karie Alvaron, joined by my partner in crime, Charles Fellingham. We're the co-founders of Let's Skill Up, and today we're talking about that part of a training program that almost never makes it into that design doc. What happens in between the sections?
Yeah, that's right. And you know, it's important to talk about this because most professional trainers really haven't been coached or schooled or been given feedback on this very important area. So it's why we thought we'd talk about it today for your benefit. And what we want to do is talk about first the real problem, bridging problems, and we're not connecting to what set that up. So there's really a failure to say out loud what the trainer already knows for the topic. This activity, this day connects to the one before it, and the connection lives in the trainer's head. Sometimes it just doesn't make it into the room. So here's some insights that we could provide to you to, like what Karie said, may not have been baked into the design or the facilitator notes. Think of the learner's experience as a sequence. Karie brought up the movie example, which I really love. So, we're building content in chunks that are connected, and the chunks usually are made up by a topic, and the topic has content that's important and an activity where you get to use it. And so there's these connections between the topic, the activity, the module overall, the whole day. But learners we don't really want them to think of it as chunks. We want to think of it as a continuous stream of moments. And this gives them the opportunity to constantly ask, often unconsciously, what did we just stop that and start this? Why did we do that? If we don't answer that question, they answer it themselves. And usually with something that this must not be important, or I guess we're doing something different now. And so their mind is drifting, and especially in a virtual environment, what happens when a participant's mind begins to drift? So we've already established, why the session 2 builds to session 1, but if you don't say it, the room's not going to make that connection. So there's a risk involved in this, and there are 3 layers we're going to talk about with respect to that unbridged transition, so that we can make that transition and keep people engaged. We don't want people to be confused about the stop-start itself. Why did we just stop that? Why are we starting this now? So there's also this missing logic. If learners accept that something new is starting, but they don't know what it has to do with what came before, there's really no visible sequence, just a pile of unrelated pieces and chunks. We don't want to have a mental disconnection. This is an expensive one, if I could use the term. The second a learner can't answer, why are we here now? Why this, why now? Their brain looks for something else to do with the space it just freed up. So that's the exact moment that they think, I wonder who's emailing me. Should I check my Slack? You didn't lose them to their phone, you lost them to the gap that you left before they even picked it up. Distraction, here's a great quote. Distraction isn't the cause of disengagement. It's what rushes in to fill the vacuum that a missing bridge leaves behind.
Exactly. I think your point about not bridging effectively is expensive is so true, right? Because we could potentially lose our audience. They start to question, and we have to backtrack then. We have to do so much extra work to get them to mentally engage again from that disengagement. Going back to the thought about movies, just think about, good movies, they don't give the audience the room to check their phone. It's not an accident. It's by design. Keep the audience engaged. And the more not only effective, but the more efficient the training will be.
Yeah, it's so true. And when we think about this, there's some common traps we can fall into, like moving straight from one topic to the next with no announcement that anything just happened. And oftentimes when you're working with a deck, whether it's virtual or live, you don't have that transition slide in there. So you've got to communicate it creatively in a way in which they look forward to what's coming next. Another one, opening day 2 or a session 2 of multiple part program with new content instead of a bridge back to day 1. Assuming the agenda or slide is doing the connecting for you, don't make that assumption. If it is, it's usually it's a light touch, and it requires you to give it some depth. Not requiring dead air is never actually not realizing that you've got dead air is never actually empty. It's the exact window where the learner's attention goes looking for something else. So let's talk about, a reframe. The content doesn't create the through line. You do out loud. Every time you move, skip it, and you're not just leaving a gap, you're handing your listeners and your learners an invitation to leave with it.
Charles, you're making me think of a time when this happened to me. I have fallen into this trap many times. But one in particular, there was this 3-day leadership training, and we were on day 3, right after lunch, and everyone was tired. I was tired. The participants were tired. I'm sure the participants were thinking, how much longer before we have to go home? Yeah. Leadership training that was packed with so much content. And so we got to, coming back from lunch, I walked to the front of the room that was an in-person training and said, okay, let's start talking about coaching. And I just saw their faces. They were drawn, they were tired. They were like, wait, where are we coming from? Where are we going next? I don't understand. It's not landing, because I was, of course, checking email during lunch and trying to get caught up on Slack messages. And I realized with that just like silence and that total vibe of being drained across the entire group, I said, okay, this is not the way to start a session. What we need to do instead is everyone stand up. Of course, we're in person. Stand up, find a partner, and let's discuss. We were just talking about feedback before going to lunch. And we came up with an action plan on providing feedback to a specific person that we're leading. Talk with the person that you partner with about what do you think? How do you think that person will react? Then they had that quick, 2-minute conversation. We came back as a whole group, debriefed that conversation, and then said, all right, so what does feedback have to do with coaching? How do the two connect? And why is it important to couple feedback with coaching? All right, let's dive into how we can be effective coaches so that when we get to the end of our feedback conversation, it doesn't just hang there, but we can move into, all right, what action can we take by developing our team members? From there, we were off and running.
Yes, very creative, by the way, to get them to stand and make that sort of connection by having them do something with a partner. That's great.
Exactly, exactly. And it doesn't have to go to that level of time or depth for every single bridge that we create, right? That was just in that particular case because it was managing, yes, transitioning from pre-lunch to post-lunch in a very long training. Um, and it could be a lot shorter, right? When we're just transitioning from one topic to another. So let's dive into some potential tools that we could use or a framework that we could leverage so that when we're in that moment of saying, "Oh, I need to bridge. I'm not just going to jump from one topic to another."
Right.
We have a framework that we can lean on to actually be able to do that. What framework have you used, Charles?
Well, I think the framework that I like is to get them involved in the transition, as opposed to just trying to put it all on yourself, like your example was, where you actually have them have a conversation. You can ask a reflective question and
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So, some of the tools that we could use are really it comes in three stages. So, think of three moves you make every time you transition between the activities, between topics, between sessions, or between days.
Mm-hmm.
So the first stage would be anchor. What did we just do uh, uh, concretely? Name it in one sentence, not let's recap for actual. For actual content, we just built a coaching script for a specific conversation. And
Or
then,
we just built an action plan for how we'll provide effective feedback.
yeah, yeah. And so that gets us off to a good start. And then we've got the thread. What does the connect to what's next? What does that connect? What would be your thoughts about that?
So here it's really stating the relationship out loud between the anchor and where we're going next. So we were just talking about coaching. We built a coaching script for a specific conversation, and this has to do with delegation in that X, Y, and Z, right? We specifically state that thread, that connection between topic A and topic B. Or, like Charles mentioned, we could ask a question to get it to come from the group as opposed to just coming from us.
Right.
And then from there, we move to launch, right? So it's anchor, thread, launch. This can sound like just answering the question, why should the room care about what's coming, right? It gets them engaged, gets them to say, okay, I'm in my seat, I have my seatbelt buckled, I'm ready to go. What does this sound like, Charles, the launch stage?
So you're really, framing the next piece. And I've got a little tip, which I like to use for professional trainers, which sends a big message to the participants. And that is when you go anchor and thread, you're on a transition slide, but you're also introducing what's coming next with launch. Keep that slide in your hip pocket until you say, so we're going to be covering this, and then launch the slide. It tells the participants you know your content. So
Seamless.
reveal the next slide just as you're announcing the launch piece.
Exactly. So again, we just built a coaching script for a specific conversation. And in this conversation, what might happen is we might then delegate something to this person because we realize they need an opportunity to develop this specific skill set. So let's dive into delegation, and then we have a slide that might have a visual showing delegation or the delegation steps. And let's get going.
It really does require you to know what that linkage is. For instance, what's the linkage between feedback and delegation? Well, in my mind, it might be that you give somebody feedback on something they're doing and something they can improve on, so they own it. And you can bridge to delegation by saying, hey, ownership is true in delegation too, and that's going to be our next topic. And you can use those three areas of anchor, thread, and launch to make that kind of effective transition.
Exactly. Essentially, as we move through anchor, thread, launch, we need to answer internally or externally three
Mhm.
questions. One, what's the sentence that names what we just did?
Yeah.
Two, what's the one sentence that names why it leads here? And three, what's the one line that makes the room want the next thing?
Right. And just a thought, important. If you're going from day one to day two, we think we're going to start into day two just by announcing the agenda or the objectives or whatever. When really the best start from day one to day two is the bridge from day one. And day one, we covered this, and here's the linkage to what we're going to be covering today.
Exactly. If we think about again going back to media as an analogy, right? Movies, TV shows, great TV shows. The next episode starts with a quick recap, right? To to again get people mentally engaged and mentally caught up with, okay, here's where we're coming from, here's where we're going next. Builds excitement, right? It gets people to say, all right, I remember where we are. I feel planted. I feel landed. Let's go. Same thing with the bridge concept. So we can pull from our personal lives and the various shows that we might watch
That's
to
right.
to as examples. So why don't we take a few minutes to see what does this actually look like? So Charles and I are going to have some fun here. We'll do a live demo of demonstrating this anchor thread launch framework to just live real time build some bridges to show that we can do it even when it's not necessarily planned. Why don't we start with something super simple, super random, Charles?
All right.
Why
Good.
don't we say, so I'll launch the first one, then you can launch one to me and back and forth.
All right. Let's see.
Um, so why don't we say, Charles Bridge, apples to oranges? What would that sound like?
That is random. All right. We just talked about apples. Some of the characteristics of apples are that they're crisp, they're eaten whole,
Hmm.
skin all. But not every fruit works that way. Let me think. Some need a little more effort to get to the good part, which brings us to oranges, where the reward is still there. It just takes a peel. You remove the peel first, which is the launch piece. So we had anchor, we had thread, we had launch.
Nice, nice. All right, Charles, you got one for me?
I do. Let's look at a more concrete example that we may run into. So this is a real training in pairs. So we're moving to what pairing trainers actually face in that kind of activity.
Hmm.
So two topics that sit next to each other on an agenda with no obvious link out loud. So let's take okay. So here's the bridge: giving feedback to delegating work. What do you got with that?
I think we actually came up with this one earlier. Can you throw a different one at me, Charles?
Yeah, but coaching to managing conflict.
All right, all right. So, so we just came up with our coaching plan. We identified a person that we are going to effectively coach to the best of our ability, of course, based on what we've learned here. But sometimes what might happen in those coaching conversations, there it might not go as seamlessly as we have planned here, right? What could be some challenges that we get? Could we potentially get into some conflict? How important for us is it as leaders to be able to effectively manage conflict? Let's dive into some things that can help us to, when we get into that situation of managing conflict, navigate that situation effectively and confidently.
That was seamless. Yeah, it's so good because you made the connection there that, when we coach, we'll get pushback sometimes, and we've got to manage that kind of conflict. And so that
Exactly.
was really, really well done. Anchor, thread, launch, all were satisfied
Thank
in
you.
that.
Thank you. All right. How about we do one more? You ready? One more. Why don't we think about some of our fun things that we've talked about on this show?
Okay.
So Charles, if you could bridge for us,
Mhm.
breakout rooms to debriefs.
Ah, okay. All right, let's give it a try. So we've talked about how a breakout room is only as good as what you set up before it, because you're moving them into an activity and there's a reason for that. So you set that up.
Hmm.
But everything a group produces in that room is wasted if nobody really unpacks it afterwards. That whole give the group an opportunity to express what they learned about it. And so the thread is so that's exactly why the debrief matters as
Hmm.
much as the activity itself. It's the next thing every well run breakout needs. That's the launch piece.
Nice, solid, clear connection, and concise on top of that, which is helpful from a timing standpoint.
Right.
So there you have it, everyone. It's very simple, right? All we have to do, just like we've mentioned, anchor, find the connection between topic A, topic B, and dive into it, right? Bring in that energy, bring in that emotion, and people will follow you into that next topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we have
Yeah. What are some takeaways do you think from what we've talked about today?
Yeah, I would say if I boil it down to maybe three takeaways, remember that a bridge isn't filler content. It
Mhm.
is extremely critical to make sure that we do it effectively so that we keep our audience engaged and they don't start thinking about what are people slacking me. Use the sequence, anchor, thread, and launch. And that is a really simple framework that we can leverage every time that we need to bridge. And remember, if we're already mid-session or mid-program with no bridges built in, that's okay. We don't need to redesign the entire thing. All we need to do is just like Charles and I did here, jump into it, anchor, thread, bridge, and launch into or anchor thread launch, and we launch into the next section. Remember, it's not overly complicated, but we do have to build that connection for our participants so that they stay engaged.
I love what you said about how a bridge isn't a filler between the content. It's as important as anything you're delivering. It's meaningful because it keeps people engaged.
Exactly, exactly. Well, everyone, thanks for listening to our Let's Skill Up trainer table. If this resonated, share it with a trainer or L&D manager. Find us on letskillup.com and you'll see many more resources in our playbook on how to not only bridge, but do other critical components of being effective trainers. And we will see you next time.